Hello, in this video we're going to be looking at parallel lines cut by a transversal. So let's talk about some important angles that we already know. Supplementary and complementary angles. Supplementary angles actually add up to 180 degrees. If you notice, they make what's called a linear pair. So for example, if this angle right here were 70 degrees, then this angle over here would be 110 degrees. Together, they add up to 180. These two are complementary angles. Together, they give you a 90-degree angle. So if this angle right here is 30 degrees, this angle right here would be 60 degrees. Together, they add up to 90. So supplementary is 180, complementary adds up to 90. Vertical and adjacent angles. Vertical angles look like this, when you've got two lines that intersect, and what that means is we have an angle over here that will be congruent to the angle over here. So in other words, if this is, say, 60 degrees, then this one will also be 60 degrees. The very cool thing about this is that if this is 60 and this is 60, these two angles over here will also be congruent. So I'll say that one is congruent to this angle over here. And part of what we know is that if this angle is 60, then this one must be 120, because these two together make basically a straight line. Together they're 180. Well, if these two add up to 180, then these two certainly add up to 180. And 120 and 60 add up to 180, which means this angle right here would have to be 120. So that's vertical angles. Those are angles that are created when you have two lines that intersect, and basically they are the angles that are across from each other. Vertical. They kind of make a V. Okay, adjacent angles just mean that they're next to each other and they share a side. Doesn't mean that they're congruent. Doesn't mean that they add up to a certain amount. Adjacent just means next to. So if I said, you're sitting adjacent to your mom, that means you're sitting next to your mom. Adjacent just means next to, but they have to share a side. Corresponding angles. These are some of my favorite. So we have what's called parallel lines, and these two lines are parallel. A lot of times you'll see symbols on them that look like this. Looks like a little V turned to the side. What that means is this line is parallel to this line. Sometimes you'll also see some double marks like that. And what that means is this line is parallel to this one. Okay, corresponding basically means that if you've got two lines that are parallel, then the angles up on the top actually will match up with the angles on the bottom. So let me see if I can do this here. So I'm tracing that, and what I can do from here is if I take this and pull this down, you'll notice the angle and all the other angles match up. So I'll do it again. So I traced this right here, and you'll notice this angle right here, if I slide this down the transversal, has a twin down on the bottom. This angle up here matches with this one right here. Similarly, I have this angle. We'll call this one Y. If I do the same thing, whoops, let me get my selecting pen here. If I drag this one down the transversal, it matches up here. And by the way, this line right here, the line that cuts the parallel lines, is called the transversal. And these are my two parallel lines. Okay, so you have actually 4 pair of corresponding. Okay, so that's corresponding angles that match up with each other. Alternate interior angles. Now I like alternate interior angles, and part of the reason that I like alternate interior because these make logical sense. Alternate kind of sounds like opposite. Interior, like the interior of a home, is on the inside. So if I'm looking at my two parallel lines here, this is the interior. And what this means basically is the angles that are opposite each other are actually congruent. So this angle right here is going to be the same as this one right here. They're called alternate interior, opposite and on the inside. And you have another pair on the other side. Alternate exterior, very similar. Alternate, think of opposite, so that means opposite sides of the transversal. Exterior meaning outside. If I ask you to go to the exterior of a home, you're going to go outside. So on the outside, if you have this angle right here, it will be congruent to the one on the opposite side of the transversal on the outside of the parallel lines. So in other words, the outside of your parallel lines is here and here. So then you have two angles here. So you have two sets of alternate exterior. Consecutive interior, I'm just going to show you basically what that means. Consecutive means one right after the other. Interior means inside. So we're talking about angles on the inside of the parallel lines. So here we have these two angles right here. They are not actually equal. They don't look equal, do they? This one looks like it's acute. And this one right here looks like it's obtuse, meaning it's bigger than 180. These two angles right here actually are not congruent. They do add up to 180. And that's something that we're going to talk about in our next lesson. So let's see if we can get a little practice naming these. Let me get a good pen here. So these two look like they're matching. The matching ones are called corresponding. Let's take a look at these two. They're on the outside of the parallel lines, so that's one of your exterior ones, and they're on opposite sides, so alternate meaning opposite, exterior meaning outside. So this would be alternate exterior. These two angles are actually across from each other, which means they are vertical. These two are on the same side of the transversal, so they're not one of the alternate ones. These two actually look like they're matching. That's your corresponding. Oh, my pen here is going crazy. Let me fix this. Okay, continuing on, these two do not look like they're matching. In other words, they don't look like they're twins, but they are both on the outside of the parallel line. So if they're on the outside, they're alternate exterior. These two are next to each other, and they are not the same. They don't look like they're the same angle measure. One looks acute, the other one looks obtuse, so they definitely don't look the same, but they are next to each other, and that would be adjacent. These two are on the inside of the parallel lines, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal, so that's alternate, interior. These two are on the same side, so they are consecutive, and they're on the inside, so that's interior. These two actually are next to each other, so we're going to say they are adjacent. These two are on opposite sides of the transversal, but on the inside. So that's going to be alternate, interior. Last couple. These are both on the inside, so they're both on the interior, but they're not alternate. So these would be consecutive, meaning one after the other. Interior. And these two are across from each other, so that would be vertical. It's a lot of vocabulary that you have to know here. Speaking about vocabulary, let's just make sure you remember your symbols. If you have a line, just as a quick reference here, you would label it like this, line AB. Maybe you remember that, maybe you forgot. If you have a line segment, you would label that as line segment CD. You could also say line segment DC, and you could have also said line BA. They're both the same. But notice this one has arrows on it, meaning it goes on for infinity in both directions, whereas this one does not. Line segment ends at two endpoints. If you have a ray, there's a very specific way to write this. You do draw the symbol that looks like a ray, but when you put your points on the bottom, you have to start with your endpoint. The first letter must be your endpoint. Now an angle, angles are interesting. There's actually 4 ways to name this angle. You could say angle, there's your angle symbol, 1. You could also say angle F, because that is your point in the middle. That's at your vertex there. But the proper way to do it is to use 3 letters. So you could say E, F, G, keeping in mind though that your F must be in the middle. Or you could say angle G, F, E. So that's 4 ways you could actually name that angle. If I wanted to refer to the measure of the angle, I would say measure of angle 1. I would use this little M here. Or you could say measure of angle F. Or you could say measure of angle GFE. Again, keeping in mind that your F must be in the middle. Or you could say measure of angle EFG. And if you're trying to name a triangle, then you would just put the letters in clockwise position. So you could say triangle, there's your symbol, STR. Or you could say triangle TRS. Or you could say triangle RST. Lots of ways you could name that. Okay, so let's practice. Let's do a little bit of practice here. Let's make sure we've got this. Name 4 ways to name that angle. So you could say angle 5, you could say angle B, or you could say angle ABC, keeping in mind that the B has to be in the middle. Or you could say angle CBA. There are your 4 ways. Let's try this again. Question number 2. So you could say, whoops, made a little mistake here. You could say angle 4. You could say angle J, keeping in mind that it has to be the letter in the middle. Or you could say angle IJK. Or you could say angle KJI. Any of those would work, but keeping in mind that the J has to be in the middle. Now we're going to name each pair of angles as either corresponding, those are our matching, alternate interior, alternate exterior, vertical, or adjacent. Okay, so if we look at these two, these are alternate interior because they're on opposite sides. These two make your V's, that's vertical because they are across from each other. These two look like twins. So in other words, this is the one where if I trace this and slide it down my transversal, it's going to match up down here. So it's like it's twin. So we're going to say that that is corresponding. These two are on opposite sides of the transversal, so that's one of our alternate, but they're on the outside, so that's alternate exterior. I'm just going to abbreviate here. These two are on the same side of the transversal, so they're not the alternate. They look like twins. This is the one where if I slide this down the transversal, I'm going to get that angle right there. That's corresponding. These two are across from each other, that's vertical. These two are on opposite sides, so that's alternate, but they're on the inside, so that's alternate interior. These two are next to each other and they share a side, that's adjacent. Okay, if we look at these two look like they're twins, like this has got a twin down here that's corresponding. These two are on opposite sides, but they're on the outside, so that's going to be alternate exterior. These share the vertex in the middle, they make the V's, that's vertical. And these two are next to each other and share a side, these are adjacent. One last little thing. I want you to find the measure of the angles that are indicated. So in other words, if this one is 125 degrees, this one is your alternate interior angle. They're going to be the same. So the missing angle here is 125 degrees. If you wanted to find all the other angle measures, you could easily do that. If this is 125, then the one next to it, these two angles together make a straight line. They would add up to 180 degrees. So if this is 125, 180 minus 125 would be 55 degrees. And if that's 55, then the one across from it's also going to be 55. And these two together would add up to 180, so if that's 125, this is actually going to be 125. And all of these angles that you see here are all going to be the same up here. So in other words, this is 55, this is 125, this is 125, and this is 55. So you actually only have two angle measures there. So we could do the same thing on this one now. If you look at these two are consecutive interior angles, and they actually don't look like they're the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to label all of these. So if this is 65, these two together make up a straight line. So if that's 65, then this is going to be 115 degrees. If this is 115, then these two add up to 180. So if that's 115, this one must be 65, which makes sense. The two 65s are across from each other, and this is going to be 115 degrees. All four of these angles are going to be the same as all four of these angles right here. So that means this is 65, this is 115, this is going to be 65, and this is 115. So your question mark is actually 115 degrees. In 17, you have the same situation, but these two are across from each other, so there's really They're vertical. That means they're congruent. So that's just going to be 119 degrees. 18. These are on opposite sides of the transversal, which means they are congruent. They're alternate exterior, so if that's 134, this is 134. And again, if you're not sure about that, what you can do is fill in all the other angle measures. So if that's 134, these two make up a straight line. They make up 180 degrees. So you could do 180 minus 134. So that means this angle would be 46. If this one's 46, the one underneath it, these two make up 180. So that means this must be 134. And if this is 134, this must be 46. All four of these angles are going to be the same on the bottom. So 134, 46, 134, and 46. So that's how you could figure that out. So your answer here, your question, is actually 134 degrees. Okay, there's a lot of vocabulary that we have here, but what I'd like you to try and do, and you may want to have either the slides open or open the blank notebook page that I put on my website and just have the angle names right up in front of you while you do this. But I'd like you to do some practice questions. No more than 20 minutes. Do as many as you can in the 20 minutes and then stop. Okay, good luck.